Take it from someone who's broken a lot of fly rods. You have to be careful where you set it. Don't lay it on the ground, because if you do, you can be certain that your favorite fishing partner, Bigfoot, is going to step on it. Stick it somewhere where it's going to stand up. All it takes is a clump of grass, and this way, no one's going to bust it on you. There are a couple of ways of straightening the leader. My favorite is to go out and hook a 25-inch trout on the first cast. That takes all the kinks out immediately. If you can't do that, then you can pull on it, or you can rub it with a piece of rubber. I've heard some fairly silly stories. I heard someone saying you should never ever rub a leader with a piece of rubber because it heats the nylon and it breaks. As a matter of fact, for the demonstration, he used a piece of toilet paper, and yes, he rubbed it very fast, and then even 20-pound test busted with a very slight pull. You know, that's the reason that I never cast to a trout holding a piece of toilet paper. When you pull on a leader, wrap it a couple times. Don't wrap it once, because there's many times I've had that line cut right down to the bone. So wrap it up a couple times, get a good pull on it, and just give it a good steady pull. Don't jerk it. Just pull steady, hold for a few seconds to let it take the kinks out, and then release. That will leave your leader fairly straight. Rub it. Rub it fast. Just hit it with about 4 or 5 times. You can do it with your fingers, you can do it with a piece of rubber. You can do it with leather. Here it is, November, but there's still plenty of weed left on Nelson Spring Creek. Basically, if you're in a weedy situation, it's better to use a knotless commercial leader. Usually I don't like commercially made leaders, but if I tie my own, I got 13 or 14 different knots in it. And in a weedy situation, every one of those knots pick up gunk. And I end up with a Christmas tree of green, weed hanging off of every knot. First thing you do when you step into a stream is look at the water first. A lot of people, when they're entering a stream, their eyes are out, they're watching the rising trout, they're not looking what's down below them. As a result, you could spook a trout that's right in next to the bank. It doesn't have to be a big fish. A lot of times I'll call these sentinel trout. They'll spook, they'll move out to the middle of the stream, and they'll make the trout out there nervous and much harder to catch. You've seen your trout, you're waiting, you're approaching them. How do you do it? Here's the wrong way. It sends a wake out in front of you, and it will spook fish from a long way away. You let those ripples settle down. Here's the right way. You pick your foot up, you turn your toe down, and you poke it into the water. By doing that, you minimize the splash that you're sending ahead of you. Here you are. There are trout rising all over the stream. First thing, don't scattergun. Don't cast and drift your fly anywhere in the hopes of picking up a fish. Pick out one trout and stalk them. The main decision you have to make is what angle you're going to approach from. Remembering all the time that more than one angle may be right. Our target is the edge of that weed bed. What's happening is pretty simple. The water is piling up against it. As the water piles, it slows, and that concentrates the insects. There is a trout rising right at the edge of the weeds. We can take him from a number of different angles. Number one, we could try him from upstream by casting directly downstream. We have to drop the fly 2.5 feet above him. We have to have enough slack for the fly to then drift drag free. We can achieve that slack with a cast like an S-cast or a check cast. I wiggle the rod, I do an S-cast, I put all sorts of garbage slack line in the water. That drifts the fly down to where the fish is. You could try to take the trout from across stream. Now actually, when you're casting across currents, you have more drag problems than you do when you're casting straight downstream. You have to get slack, but the slack has to be laying where it'll do the most good. I like to throw a little curve. I like to get the fly moving ahead of the leader, and again, I want enough slack to drift it into the fish's mouth. When I'm talking about curve, in this situation, when I'm saying that I want the fly ahead of the leader, that means that it has to curve around and down. The way I achieve that is the same way that a pitcher throws a curveball or a screwball. If I want that fly to curve upstream, I would snap my wrist and throw a curveball. If I want that fly to curve downstream, I turn my wrist over to the right and I throw a screwball. This is probably the best presentation when you're simply considering a drag-free float. I can lay the fly in there, the line is coming down pretty much the same speed as the fly, and a little bit of slack gives me a long drift. Oh!